We'll make a start. Good evening, everyone. Our speaker tonight is our good friend Mirjana, and we're thrilled to have her back talking to us again. The topic for tonight is, O ye of great wealth and poor health, the powerful and notable people in the Renaissance Florence, diseases and healthcare. And in her notes, Mirjana has pointed out that there were two groups, two generations of the Medici. The first generation were relatively short-lived, but reasonably healthy, apart from one or two major diseases. But then the second generation, who lived much longer, had a whole wealth of diseases that Mirjana will talk about. And one of the things I think she's going to look at is why there was so much disease in the second generation. Who did these people marry and interact with? And so did that affect their health outcomes? But anyway, I'd like you to welcome once again a good friend, Mirjana, and thank you for your talk.
Thank you, Terence. Well, good evening, everybody. Tena koto katoa. Dobra večer I dobrodošli. And this time, unlike last time, I'm not going to torture you with Latin, because we are, as of tonight, we are entering into high Renaissance. So we are no longer that early, still under the influence of church. Now we are getting into humanist Renaissance. And so I would like to say, buonasera a tutti e benvenuti. I'm sure you understand what I said. Well, it is my greatest pleasure to welcome you tonight to this talk. Tonight, we are going to talk about the other side of the Medici family. We are going to talk about the family that was secondogenito from Giovanni de' Medici. You remember in last talk, we spoke about 5 generations, or the first 5 generations of primogenito. It was Cosimo's side of the family. But rest assured, you will know, you will be very clear about the family tree and who fits where in that large family. So, andiamo, and allow me to take you to Florence, where I believe we will spend a very nice time, very nice next 50 minutes getting to know Medicis and all what they were up to in those days. So tonight, I would like to concentrate or tell you a little bit more about the Medici popes. There were 3 of them. There were 4 of them, but one of them was the Medici branch from Milan, which is very little known of. Tonight, we will concentrate on those 3, actually on 2, on Leo the 10th and Clement VII mainly, because they are from that major branch. And then we will go to Grand Dukes. Tonight, we will talk about the Grand Duke Cosimo I, his wife Eleonora, of Toledo, and Francesco, his son Francesco I, and his wife Giovanna of Austria. And as I promised, we will also say a few words about Catherine the Medici, who is the part of that primogenito generation. But you will find it out soon. So if you recall my last talk, we spoke about Tuscany, we spoke about the region of Mugello, and we spoke about Cafaggiolo. And this is where the family of the primogenito or Cosimo family usually went into their countryside. Now, the secondogenito, or Lorenzo the Elder, as you will see later, they mainly went for their summer holidays, weekends to Trebbio. So on the left, we've got Casa Medici di Cafaggiolo, Cosimo's family, and here we've got on the right, Casa Medici di Trebbio, where Lorenzo resided. Now, yes, Medici lineage, we are following the Medici family from Averardo de' Tobici, who was born, who lived at the beginning of the 14th century until the end of the line. The line ended with Anna Maria Luisa, who was a daughter of the 6th Grand Duke, Cosimo III, until the mid-1743, so until the mid of the 18th century. This is the family tree, and here I have tried to point out what we have already learned about the primogenito line. So here we start. Last time we spoke about Averardo. We spoke about Giovanni di Bicci. Then his two sons, Cosimo il Vecchio and Lorenzo. And from Cosimo, because he was the first son, so it was the primogenito line, we go all the way down here. And it ends here, primogenito line. Now, those numbers that you can see in brackets, they are the age at their death. So what we've got here is that Giovanni de' Bicci, he died at the age of 69. Cosimo died at the age of 75. Sorry. His sons, Piero il Gottoso or Piero di Gauti, he lived until the age of 53. His brothers, Giovanni, 42, and Carlo, 62. Then Piero's son, Lorenzo, he lived 43, and so on. So here you can see that the more we go down the line, there is the gradual decline in longevity. Now, the green line shows the characters or the people that we already met in my last talk. So I spoke about the first 5 generations, and we ended up here with Lorenzo the Magnificent. Actually, Lorenzo and his brother Giuliano, who was assassinated on Easter Sunday Mass at the Duomo Cathedral in Florence. Now, the second line, we will meet soon. So the secondogenito starts with Lorenzo, but Lorenzo the elder, and he was brother of Cosimo, again the elder. So we will follow this line. Now, here there is one name that I have marked in red or pink. It's Maria. Maria Salviati. And here we've got Maria Salviati. What does that mean? That means it's the same person. And as a result of that, what conclusion can you draw? That actually she married from primogenito line into secondogenito line. And there is an explanation to that. Because Cosimo, with his family, usually took his summer holidays and weekends in Cafaggiolo, and Lorenzo was in Trebbio. Although they bordered, they are all in that area of Mugello, they weren't that very close. So they drifted apart. And so by Giovanni delle Bande Nere, or in English, it would be John of the Black Band, he married Maria Salviati, who was a granddaughter of Lorenzo il Magnifico. So basically, the secondogenito line or cadet generation starts with Giovanni delle Bande Nere, and then you go down to Grand Dukes. So basically from primogenito, it swaps to the secondogenito. Okay. Right. Last time we also spoke about the age at their death and the periods when they were born. So these blue ones were the ones that belonged to the primogenito line. Actually, the generations, the first 5 generations, the ones that we met last time. And here in yellow is the beginning of the secondogenito generation, because this was the younger brother of Cosimo the Elder. I believe that you all remember that was the adoration of the Magi. And here we have, even though it was painted after Cosimo died. I believe that you recognize some of the family members of the primogenito generation: Cosimo, Piero, his son Lorenzo, and Giovanni, Giulio. They're all there. Now, what did they die of? We are going back. I just want to give a short recap of the last talk. So what did they die of, and what was the pathology of the first generation? We don't know much about Averardo. Giovanni di Bici, we know that he suffered from catarrh, but he was quite healthy. Here for Cosimo the Elder, you remember that he had some of those rheumatic or arthritic nodes on his hands. So he died of kidney failure. He suffered from chronic urinary disease, rheumatic pain, and enlarged prostate. But there were also some side diseases that he was suffering from, but these were really the major ones. His brother, Lorenzo the Elder, I will mention something about him from the last lecture. So just to give you introduction into today's line of the Medici, he died of dysentery and infirmity. Piero de' Gauti, unfortunately, he was the one who was really gravely stricken by gout. And by gout, I had a little bit of extra research into the gout. And in those days, the term gout related mainly to a group of rheumatic, arthritic, uremic, even some kidney failures. So gout was a composite noun of many things. So when they say, oh, gout here, gout there, actually it included quite few terms. So Piero de' Gauti, he suffered from gout, uricemia, and cerebral lesion with aphasia. So he had difficulty talking. Lorenzo the Magnificent, he was remarkable, died at the age of 43, very young, but he had that arthritis deformans. And if you remember in my last talk, I said how often he frequented and visited the spas in order to find some kind of relief for his disease, but it was really, really tough. And then his brother, Giuliano, was assassinated. He was only 25. The next, here now we are going to the secondogenito, or the line of the second son of Giovanni di Bici. So here we start with Lorenzo. And here in black, I have put the age at which they died. So Lorenzo died at 45. His son, Pierfrancesco Vecchio, at 46. Giovanni il Popolano, so the grandson, at 31. And so we see the decline in age. However, as of Fernando, we see, Ferdinando, we see that he died at 60. Then we've got Carlo, his son. He died at 70. So they gradually are starting to increase in their longevity. Now, when we look at this side, so this side of the family, until Caterina, she's the last one. So here we've got that primogenito, Cosimo side of the family, and Lorenzo is here. Oops, sorry. Lorenzo is here. What do we see? It was much larger family. So when we look at, for example, Giovanni delle Bande Nere, he was assassinated. Actually, he wasn't assassinated. He was badly wounded in one battle, and they say that he died as a result of those wounds, but also of the medical negligence. Some say also that they let him die. They didn't really care about him properly. So he died at the age of 28, and he only had one son, Cosimo I, who died at the age of 55. Cosimo I was married 2 times, and we will see later on, I'll tell a little bit more about him, but he made sure that he's got many children, and he did. So, but in those days, still the child mortality or infant mortality was still high. So they wanted to ensure that their line continues. So in this talk today, I will just reflect briefly on Lorenzo the Elder, something from our previous lecture. And then we will talk about Cosimo I, because you will see the pathology has changed. And the whole side of this secondogenito pathology has changed. And there are new diseases that haven't been mentioned much in the Cosimo's primogenito line. And we will also talk about Francesco I. Ferdinando, I will leave it for the part 3 until the end of the line. So there were the total of 7 Grand Dukes. Today we will talk about 2. Right, so let's go and talk about Cosimo's brother. So he is Lorenzo di Giovanni de' Medici, Cosimo's younger brother. So he was also known as Lorenzo the Elder. So we can see that he was quite fit. He was quite good looking. He was quite popular with women, as many of them, those nobles were. And we don't know much about his general health. The historian Vespasiano da Bistici reported that he was of good health. There are records that he had a toothache. He went once with his nephew Piero to Meceretto Spa, which was something that he didn't frequent, that he didn't visit very often. When Piero wrote to his father, so Piero was the gouty one, when Piero wrote to his father Cosimo, he said that Lorenzo was already feeling better, improved a lot from scabies. So he wasn't that much affected by those rheumatic or arthritic disease. He was actually more on the side of the skin diseases. So he suffered from scabies, from some kind of psoriasis or whatever was quite common in those time periods. And that the waters helped him recover. So what can we say about him as a man? What were his physical characteristics? He was an active man. As we can see, he does look very fit and looks quite good. He was lover of pleasures of the countryside and the physical exercise. The same year before his death, so he died in 1440, he wrote a letter to his nephew Giovanni, Cosimo's second son. So there was Piero, Giovanni, and Carlo. And he asked him to send some hunting dogs to his countryside because he wanted to go hunting. He died at the age of 45, which is quite early, and he died of dysentery. So we don't hear about dysentery very much in Cosimo's side of the family, especially not in those early generations. Okay, so today we are going to talk about those 3 Medici popes. Oh, their characters. Some of them are really, really interesting. Then we will talk about the first Grand Duke of Tuscany, Cosimo I, and Francesco I. And I just, for the comparison reason, put the age at death of Cosimo's second son, who became the 3rd Grand Duke of Tuscany. He was Francesco's younger brother. So here we see that, but let me just tell you, Leo Clement and Leo the 11th, they are part of the primogenito line, but they just happen to be the popes. So from the secondogenito line, here we've got 55, 46, 60, 70. So it looks like it is going up. So the Cadet generation, as I said, there were 7 Grand Dukes. Today we will tackle Cosimo I and Francesco I. And then the rest of them, Ferdinando I, Cosimo II, Ferdinando II, Cosimo III, and Gian Gastone was the last one. So here we see the emergence of new diseases, such as diabetes, such as obesity, tuberculosis, parasitic lungs, cardiopulmonary failure, stroke. So something that that wasn't known in the first generation. So, and this is Giovanni delle Bandenere. As I said, he was the father of the first Grand Duke of Tuscany. And he married Maria Salviati from the primogenito line. And I think that was the way not just to strengthen family ties, but also to give new life to that kind of, to those further generations. The previous fresco of Adoration of Magi always remind me of that first primogenito generation, while for the secondogenito line of the Medici, if you ask me what fresco would tell probably the best, would be the Athens schools from the Le Stanze di Raffaello in Vatican, and this was from the stanza stanza di segnatura. Here we see the Athens school, we see here Plato, Aristotle, and the other philosophers, Greek classics. But some people, when they describe this painting, they say that it looks like this was like painted Leonardo, this looks like Michelangelo, and this is Raphael. That is like he painted himself, and that's actually how he looked. So we are going to talk now about the three popes. Those three popes are here. Here is Giulio. He was the son of Giuliano. He was the illegitimate son, but when Giuliano was assassinated in the cathedral, his mistress, or however you call it, she was also killed, and so the boy was sent to Florence to Lorenzo's family to look after him, and he did. So we've got here Giulio, who became Pope Clement VII. Here we've got Giovanni. He was son of Lorenzo de' Medici. He became Pope Leo X. And here there is a star. So here we don't have that direct, it's a little bit distant out of that straight line or that direct line. And here actually Lucrezia, who was Lorenzo's daughter, she married Giacomo Salviati. She had not just Maria. Maria Salviati was the one that married into the secondogenito line, but she also had a daughter, Francesca, who later had a son, and he became Pope Leo XI. But you will notice. So these are the Medici popes, and today I tried to, to recreate a little bit that look. So Leo X, Clement VII, and Leo XI. You will see Leo XI was Pope for 27 days only. Here we see that was Giulio, when he was a cardinal that later became Clement, a very famous photo, and that was his other Luigi Rosso, his other cousin. You will see it with Pope Leo X. He was a real Medici. He loved life. He wasn't that much bothered with religious side of the things. He used it as for his pleasure. He was known for selling indulgences because he needed money to fund the wars. He had such lavish parties. No wonder he was obese. No wonder there was that plumpiness in every portrait that was painted of him. He looks like he's sleepy, maybe tired, and he was just always so plumpy, and you will see why. So he was a cardinal, at the age of 13, so his father, Lorenzo the Magnificent, he made sure that he had his hands everywhere in the papal states, that he married all his children somewhere, and that he was also known and present in the church affairs. So he was cardinal at the age of 13, and he was pope at the age of 37. So he was waiting for good 24 years until he became pope. So it was a long wait for Lorenzo to see his son on the throne. And unfortunately, he didn't. He died before. So here we've got Giovanni di Lorenzo. So I'm starting from him being still the boy, not a cardinal. Second son of Lorenzo il Magnifico. Yes, the first son of Lorenzo il Magnifico was Pietro the Unfortunate. But actually in Italian, it's Pietro il Fatuo, which means a little bit dumb, Pietro, the stupid Pietro, because he made some really, really poor decisions that made the whole Medici family into exile. So he wasn't the bravest. I'm not going to talk about Pietro much now. I'll try to concentrate more on Giovanni because their pathology is quite interesting. So Lorenzo il Magnifico, he was Florentine. Clarice Orsini, mother of Giovanni, she was from Rome. So even his father, Cosimo, made sure that his children get married into all the noble families around Italy. And that's the way he strengthened his power. So they breastfed him until he was 20 months old. And he was able to walk independently at the age of 18 months. At a very young age, he suffered from catarrh, but he was, as a child, it's been recorded that he was quite lively and healthy. He was affectionate and of abundant nutrition. Well, of course, if you live in the household of Lorenzo de' Medici, one of the richest men, not only in Italy, but very likely in Europe, of course that you will have abundant nutrition. The question is, how healthy was that nutrition? And that's something that I'm going to tell about in a moment. So in 1491, at the age of 16 in Pisa, he suffered from an intestinal discomfort and received, poor boy, repeated purgatory to eliminate all the bad stuff that was going on for 2 days. So you can imagine what kind of food and how much he was indulging in food that he had to have repeated purification, poor boy. So he was Pope for 7 years. He was the 217th Pope. And I love the motto that he took. It was, "In my distress, I cried unto the Lord and he heard me." Of course, if you are Medici, of course, the Lord will hear you. Of course, you will be a Pope. Of course, you will have everything you want. Of course, everybody will bow to you. So yeah, in my distress, yeah, right, in his distress. So he was, even though he was made cardinal at the age of 13, he was hoped to be elected Pope in 1492. That was actually the year that Lorenzo il Magnifico died. And he was at the burial, when he heard of the death, he came to the funeral, of his father when he heard that the Pope has died. So when he returned, actually he arrived in conclave, but he missed all those lobbying. Is that how you say? When, who is going to vote for whom? And he missed it, but Rodrigo Borgia, who took the name of Pope Alexander VI. Now, Rodrigo Borgia and all those Borgias, they were Spanish. They had their hands in everything, and it would be actually very interesting to see what was their pathology. So probably the opportunity for one of the future lectures. The conclave, so now we go 11 years later, then there was a conclave in 1503. Pope Pius was elected, but his papacy was very short, so that was good for Pope Leo. The next conclave, again, he was not successful. For his, I mean, it's horrible to say, but luckily for him, they didn't live for very long. So it was Giuliano della Rovere, Pope Julius II. So whenever you hear those names like della Rovere, you know immediately he's from Genova. When you hear Visconti or Sforza, you know they come from Milano. When you hear about Contarini's surname, you know immediately, oh yeah, these are Venetians, and so on. Orsini, Romans. So just by their name, you know immediately, what kind of lobby was strong, or who was in power then that pushed him to become a pope. And luck came for Giovanni X in 1513. He was known for selling those indulgences because he thought, oh yeah, and he was selling them to anybody who had money, you know, yes, the God will forgive you, but it will cost you. And so, you know, it was like balance in his ecclesiastical service. And he was also accused of nepotism. Now, I don't know whether nepotism originates from that time period, but they made sure that they were surrounded by their family members and that they could count on each other. So he made sure that he secured his nephew Lorenzo a position of Duke of Urbino, who was father of Catherine de' Medici, who died also very young. Guess from what? They say tuberculosis, but syphilis. And unfortunately, Catherine de' Medici's mom also died, well, very likely of syphilis, but you know, they're just trying to hush it up. So he was a great lover of art. Raffaello, at his time, he was painting doing the frescoes in Le Stanze. When we talk about him, what he was like a person and what were his physical characteristics, so he was happy, playful, and he seemed, from what I read, and there is a lot in my Bible by Gaetano Pieraccini, Le stirpe dei Medici di Cafaggiolo, there is a lot about what he was like as a child. There is a lot of record, and it seems like he was always so euphoric that he even mirrored that he was full of energy. He loved hunting, fishing, and riding. Poor boy, he was overweight since childhood. And his love for food turned into obesity. And as I said, if you live in the palace owned by Lorenzo de' Medici, there is a huge abundance of food. Now, let me just, maybe if I pause here and tell you a little bit about the food that was available back then. They ate a lot of meat and they drank a lot of wine. So they actually had a large intake of protein because grain or any kind of pulses were considered food of the poor. And because they could afford, I know at the court of Pope Leo, I think it was written either in Mary Hollingsworth's book about the Medici. I mean, at one wedding reception that he threw for some of his cousins' wedding into the royal family or nobility, anyway, they were stuffing even the peacock and the things, the delicacies, the amount of food and the delicacies, now a number of meals that were available, you know, like really, who spent almost weeks and weeks just preparing food for the wedding? But it was the thing back then. So their food was based mainly on animal proteins, game, fish, pheasants, and wine. And that's probably one of the reasons, even though they were active, that they weren't gaining any vegetables, because vegetable was big no. So going back to Pope Leo, his head was bigger. So he was described as a man whose body was not very proportionate. When you look at the photos, luckily he's got all his cloak that covers his actual disproportion, but it was reported that his legs were thin and slender, and in comparison with torso or head, his neck was short and meaty, and he had very little hair on his head. He was very short-sighted. That's another thing that I found interested when I was reading. He long suffered from an ulcer of his buttocks, and this is the quote from Mary Hollingsworth's book about the Medici. Actually, he did suffer from an anal fistule, the condition that he never got rid of. It must have been really very painful. And it is said that he died as a result of malaria within 7 days of the first onset of symptoms. The next one is Giulio di Giuliano, so the assassinated brother of Lorenzo il Magnifico, and he took the name of Pope Clement VII. He died at the age of 56. He was the illegitimate son on St. Peter's throne. So this is the photo of Giulio di Giuliano. So he was born, he never met his father, he was as illegitimate. Giuliano didn't even know that Fioretta Gorini, who was his lover or mistress, was pregnant. So he was born a month after the assassination of his father. He was described as a highly moral and honest, but he was quite distant and cold in his communication with people. But you know what I find really interesting, he was moral and honest, but then he had the illegitimate son. So, and now, it was Alexander, Duke of Florence, born in 1511, and his patrimony was always very questionable because he was Pope. He was pushing, that, oh no, he wasn't my son. He was actually son of Lorenzo, Duke of Urbino, and that was Catherine de' Medici's father. And so when Lorenzo, Duke of Urbino, died very young, Clement VII, he pushed immediately saying, oh, no, he was the illegitimate son of Duke of Urbino. So it's still disputable whether it was Pope's illegitimate son or Duke of Urbino's son. When Caterina was orphaned, and I will talk a little bit later about her early years, when Caterina was orphaned, Clement VII, he saw a very good opportunity to marry her well and to strengthen his position. So he took care of her and made sure that she marries well, and that's why the prospect of her marrying Henry of France looked very good. So he was very much loved, or he was very much appreciated at the court. He was 219th Pope. His papacy lasted for 11 years. He was, unlike Pope Leo X, who spent, he was just very gallant. This one was very tight. He was known for his, when they say extraordinary economy, means he was really not very generous with money. And after the death of Leo X, there was only, so Leo X was 217th Pope, this one was 219th. In between them was, in 1522, Pope Adrian VI, but he was Pope only for 2 years. He was favored both by Charles V and Francis. So Charles V was Spanish, and Francis I, he was French. So, and he knew that both of them were quite, let's say, affectionate and appreciative to Clement VII, and he knew how to balance that very nicely to his own profit or to his own advantage. So his chronicles describe him as alien to blood, not proud, not simoniac, not avaricious, not lustful, sober in food, modest in dress, religious, and he was really, really a man of cloth, I would say. Apart from that, illegitimate son. What was his pathology like? So at the age, he was quite sick. And we do have a very detailed record. This is just a little excerpt. So at the age of 36, he had small surgery on his face. It was likely furuncle removal, furunculus. Then he suffered from light rheumatic form of and gastric problems, but it was just for short period of time. Then cough, back discomfort, acute fever, cold. Even he was delirious. That worsened to the point that they thought that he was dead. And then a few days later, he got better. And he bounced back. Probably somebody who was waiting to become a next pope was not very happy about that. But he had those ups and downs in his health. He was either very unwell and then he bounced back and he was fine. And it is also said that he suffered from hepatic colicas. He frequently vomited. He suffered from jaundice. Very likely, he had gallbladder stones, and he also, there is mention of the renal colics. So here we have also, so there is all sorts of diseases that are coming up, that are emerging, that he, unfortunately, because we are already in the 16th century, so medicine was much more advanced than in the 15th century. So urine burning, he had a podagra, a fever, and there is the chronicle of he was hot interchanging with cold in August, then it was gout in October, then he was feeling better sitting in November, then gout returned. So he did have those episodes of good health and bad health. He suffered in 1534, he suffered another uremic attack. And so to the point that it was at the door that they would put the notification at the door that he was not well and he wouldn't give the audience to anybody. And it came to the point when on the 30th of July in 1534, he even felt that it was time to write a will. And about a month, a month and a half later, he died from tuberculosis. Now we come to Pope Leo XI, and he's the one from Francesca. So Lucrezia, he was basically the great-grandson of Lorenzo il Magnifico, again on that primogenito line. He was only a 27-day long papa. Do you know what was the shortest duration of the papacy? Who was the shortest? Or actually, how many days was the shortest papacy in history? Here we've got 27, fairly short. It's reported that it's been, I think, 3 or 4 of them were for only 13 days. Can you imagine you're just being elected and then instead of enjoying, doing something good, and then 13 days later, that's it? Right. So here, because he's not a direct line, we only know that he actually lived quite long. He was elected Pope when he was almost, he was a month short of 70th birthday. He died of fever, and his father died when he was only 9, so he was schooled by the Dominican monks, and he also had the brother Leon, and I think first of all he took the name Leo in respect to his predecessor Leo X, Giovanni, and also because as a memory of his brother Leon, who died very, very young. So it was a nice gesture, but he lived long, but he was Pope only for 27 days. Now we go to the Grand Duchy, and we are going to see what happened to Cosimo I, and he was a character. He was, in my opinion, not like Lorenzo il Magnifico, but I could see him as Cosimo. I mean, if I were to compare them. Before I go a little bit more in description of the pathology of Cosimo I, I just would like to introduce you, I hope maybe you have also heard about the Medici project. Medici project was conducted by the group of university professors and experts in paleopathology, bioanthropology, archaeology, historians, forensic scientists, etc., from Italy. And it was Medici project was conducted from 2004 to 2007, they examined, they exhumed 49 skeletal remains of the Medici family. And Dr. Gino Fornaciari and his team, so a team of experts from the University of Pisa and Siena, they examined the skeletons of Cosimo I, his wife Eleonora of Toledo, their son, Francesco I, who was the second Duke, and his wife Giovanna of Austria. They also examined the skeletal remains of Grand Duke Gian Gastone. They were all buried in the basement of Basilica of San Lorenzo. So because that examination was carried 15, 20 years ago, they applied the most modern tools and techniques and methodology for actually defining what is it that they were that they died of, what was their pathology based on what they found in those crypts. So here we've got Cosimo il Grande Duca. So he was very much a politician. He was in footsteps of his forefathers with politics in his veins. And I believe that this is the photo that you immediately recognize when you see these are the very famous portraits. So this is Cosimo I, and this is his wife, Eleonora of Toledo. So she was of Spanish origin. So here we see that mix of the Medici family or the Italians with other European noble families. And here we come to the point where I would like to introduce you to a book that tells you all about Vita di Cosimo de' Medici, about the life of Cosimo de' Medici, Primo Granduca di Toscana, the first Grand Duke of Tuscany. It was written by Aldo Mannucci in Bologna in 1586. And why am I presenting you with this book? Because it is in our special collections. So if you want to see, it was 16th century original. And Aldo Mannucci, he was the son of Aldo Manuzio. And Aldo Manuzio was Venetian, of early Renaissance, Venetian bookseller and printer. And this is the other area of my interest that I like to explore, very successful booksellers and book publishers of the early Renaissance Italy. So if you are interested, if you've got a little knowledge of Latin, if you've got intermediate knowledge of Italian, you'll be all right. You will be able to read it. And it's a very interesting read. And when I found it, I thought, gosh, there is no need to go to Florence, even though it's nice to go to Florence. But you can actually, pardon? It's actually a very interesting read, and it's just here in the Special Collections Library. So it was dedicated, so Aldo Mannucci dedicated that to His Majesty Catholic Philip of Spain. And look, so this is the original drawing in the book that I took as my background and as my motive on the flyer. It's a beautiful book, and I warmly recommend that you at least go and see it. Let's go back to Cosimo de' Medici. So what did he look like? So the skeleton that Dr. Gino Fornaciari and his team examined as a part of the Medici project showed that he was a vigorous man, he was of the age 50 to 60. Well, actually, he died at the age of 55. He was 1.78 meters tall, which was not short for the men in that time period. Medium-sized skull, narrow nose, which we can see even here. He had great physical strength and he was of robust constitution. And you will see from that generation, from his generation downward, they were all fairly robust. It was confirmed by his well-developed muscular insections of upper arm, of thorax, and of thigh. So there was a presence of skeletal markers of habitual horse riding. So he was very active in his youth. There was the presence of Schmorl nodes, which are vertebral body hernia. They indicated that his upper body was exposed to carrying a very heavy burden in his youth, very likely that he was carrying the armor, because he was known as a man who went to wars and who was just like any soldier. He was carrying all that armor. Now, what was he like as a family man? This is also a very famous portrait with Eleonora, his wife, and you could see the richness of the fabric, typical for Spanish fashion at the time. She was here with Giovanni, who was later cardinal, but unfortunately he died at the age of 19. So they were really made cardinals, or their parents made sure that their children that were destined to be cardinals actually become cardinals at a very early age to secure the position. He was married twice. In total, he had 14 children, 11 with Eleonora. She died very young. She died only at the age of 40. And with his wife, second wife, Camilla Martelli, he had two illegitimate children, one with Camilla and the other one with his mistress from the Albizzi family. He resided in the huge palace, Palazzo Pitti. I don't know if you've been to Florence. This is on the other side. So on one side of the river Arno, you've got Signoria, Palazzo Vecchio, you've got Duomo, you've got the Palazzo Medici Riccardi, and on the other side, you've got the beautiful Palazzo Pitti with Giardino di Boboli, beautiful gardens. If you ever happen to be in Italy or in Florence, I hope it will be soon, please don't miss the opportunity to go to see Boboli Gardens and Palazzo Pitti, but I love the Boboli Gardens. Although he was so extravagant, you know, he was a Grand Duke, so there was a celebration of every kind. There was a building, painting. He was a big lover of art. He spent money. He was very good at making money as well. But as a family man in his private life, he was actually very simple, which was quite interesting for me to learn. So at the age of 20, so that was quite early. I mean, they were getting early married. He married a 17-year-old Eleonora. And it's a very interesting story. Eleonora's father, Don Pedro, he actually wanted Cosimo to marry his first daughter, the oldest daughter, Isabella. But when Cosimo saw her, and when he just said, no, she's ugly. And so then he said, okay, I'll barter. And he got Eleonora, who was much prettier than Isabella. But even then, he knew his taste and he knew he will get what he wanted. They had quite a series of misfortunes with their children, unfortunately. So his son died upon his birth in 48, and then the daughter when she was born a few weeks after. In 1561, their daughter Lucrezia, at the age of 16, died of tuberculosis. And then this is a particularly sad time for the family. So it was, I think it was within 2 weeks that in November, Giovanni died unexpectedly. Then Garcia died 2 weeks later, within 10 to 12 days. And then within 5 days after Garcia, Eleonora passed away, and she was only 40. There is a story that apparently Garcia assassinated Giovanni, and then Cosimo assassinated killed Garcia, and the mother's heart could not bear that. So, but yes, there is a story. This is, I will take it, let's say, with a grain of salt when, you know, when there was assassination, because you will see later in the family, man, they were assassinating and they were killing and they were. So now, based on that Medici project, we can see the pathology of Cosimo I Medici, and he suffered from DISH. So when you say DISH, it's not meal, but DISH is diffuse idiopathic skeletal hyperostosis, which is basically the ossification of anterior longitudinal spinal ligament. That's this one here. So this is the spine. I mean, most of you are medical doctors, so you know, but it's sometimes good to recap the anatomy. So this is the anterior longitudinal spinal ligament, and that gets ossified. So here, and usually it is in that thoracic region toward the end. So here we've got it at 6th, 7th, and 8th thoracic vertebra. And here we've got another photo by where you can see these are not normal. This is not normal how the ligaments should look. So we see here the ossification. Here it's nice and smooth, nothing, but here we can see that something is wrong. So this is the first time that we see the pathology of DISH or DISH. And we will see it later on in his second son, Ferdinando. So Francis, he would be a little bit spared from that, but Ferdinando will have also very prominent. So what did he suffer from? As a child, he suffered from smallpox and malaria fever, bronchitis and kidney stones that appeared in his early 40s. In his late 40s, he suffered from early arteriosclerosis. Excuse me. And I think that's already the time when he started suffering from strokes in some milder forms, because his left arm was paralyzed. So arteriosclerosis, yes, maybe, but I think that he has already started suffering from strokes. In his late 40s to early 50s, suffered from gout in his right knee. So again, gout in the knee, it would be more like some kind of rheumatic arthritis, something that was really giving him problem while he was walking. And at the age of 54, he suffered from a stroke that left him with agraphia and aphasia. So difficulty writing and talking. Writing and talking. And then he suffered also from urinary incontinence, which would have been really devastating. But it is said that he died of catarrhal fever, which is bronchopneumonia, at the age of 55. So he was quite young. But there is also, in all of the portraits that we can see in Uffizi or Palazzo Pitti, wherever, we can see that he looked fairly obese. So probably that has also contributed to his pain in the knee, difficulty walking, but they were all, you will see as we progress to that generation, they all seem to be quite obese, all the way down to Gian Gastone, the 7th Grand Duke, who died of obesity and diabetes. So this is when life was quite comfortable and they could afford very good nutrition, but at the cost of health. And at the time, I'm not going to talk anything about his politics. He was a great politician, but he was the one that built Uffizi the gallery. And do you know what it was? It wasn't meant to be a gallery. Actually, Uffizi means Offices, yes, well done. The offices, so he wanted to be surrounded by offices, which were later converted into one of the most famous galleries. Now, let's see his wife, Eleonora de Toledo. So she was also examined under the Medici project, and her skeletal remains showed that they belonged to the lady of the skeletal age of 36 to 46. She was 1.58, which I would say would be the average height for the ladies of that period. Skull was medium-sized, narrow face and nose, which we can also see in all the portraits. So there were several of those very famous portraits of her, and she always looked very narrow, very elegant. She brought the style and Spanish fashion to Florence, so she was very famous for that. But this is, I believe, at a later in her later years, not very late, but later, when she was already suffering from, she was, how shall I say? She was so consumed by the disease that she looked very tired, very drained, not to mention how many deliveries, how many births she gave. So no wonder that she looked toward her 40s, that she looked really, really pale and very drained. So her muscular insertion, yes, she had mild form of rickets as a result of lack of vitamin D in her childhood. She had very high orbits, which we can see. So her skeletal remains show exactly what the portraits show. So indicated that she was of robust muscular activity. Well, bearing so many children and probably lifting them, of course, she had to have some kind of muscular activity. From the age 18 to 32, she gave birth to 11 children. So that would have taken toll on her body. Her pelvic skeletal markers confirm multiple deliveries. Severe forms of caries because with so many pregnancies, all the calcium from her teeth were taken up. It is believed that in her late 20s, she developed pulmonary tuberculosis, which was the cause of a death at the age of 40, along with pernicious malaria attack. And that's why she always looked toward the later, in her later portraits, she always looked so consumed, so tired. Now we are going to talk about, so we spoke about Cosimo, his wife Eleonora, who died at the age of 40. And now we are going to talk about Francesco I, the son, the second Grand Duke of Florence, and he was a character. You'll see what he did. So I put in one word what he was: an adulterer. He can be second Grand Duke. Okay, so he was the first son of Cosimo I, and of course he would inherit his title. And it was recorded that he really wasn't a very nice child. Because he was brought up and he grew up in great wealth, he was quite arrogant, and he developed a taste for luxurious objects, and he was very interested, and he was very scholastic. He liked the study particularly of alchemy. And he was not interested in any politics of governmental affairs. And that drove his father crazy. He was absolutely nuts because Francesco didn't take it as seriously as his father would have liked. He did take the admin works from Cosimo, but Cosimo retained the title. So he thought that it wasn't yet time for Francesco to become the Grand Duke. There is a story. So last time, I hope you remember that I said that the only thing that the Medici lacked was noble blood, or being of, marrying into some royal family. Yes, they did marry into Italian nobility, Florentine nobility, but with their wealth expanding, they actually wanted to marry well into the royal houses. And he was hoping that Francesco, his son, would marry into the royal house of Portugal, Joanna of Portugal, but he was turned down by the Spanish king, who thought that his issues and his cousins should marry much better, should marry the royals, not some banker, politician, even though he was Grand Duke. And so that pissed Cosimo off, and luckily he secured a bride in the house of Habsburg, and he got married to Giovanna of Austria in 1565. So she was 17 at the time, and they didn't spare for the wedding. It was such a luxurious, spectacular wedding. They had 7 children, 6 daughters and 1 son. And there was poor Giovanna. Can you imagine at the age of 17 starting to being pregnant? And it must have been really, really tough. Unfortunately, their children wasn't always, they didn't grow into adulthood. 2 daughters died at birth, 1 at the age of 2, 1 at 15, and the son died at the age of 5. Only 2 daughters lived into the adulthood and they married later. So it is reported that Francesco did not love his wife. He actually tormented her, and this is the word that Gaetano Piaracini wrote in his lineage of the Medici family. Because he was in love, he had a mistress called Bianca Capello. Bianca Capello was a Venetian lady who escaped from her father's or parental house so that she can be with her lover, who was a Florentine clerk, Pietro Bonaventuri. But then she got tired of him. She fell in love with Francesco, and they managed to, basically, it is said that Bianca assassinated her husband, and it was helped by Francesco. Even Cosimo knew about that, but because he liked her, he liked Bianca, so he found the way to justify that. Yeah, and then later, when Francesco became the Grand Duke, of course, she was pardoned. His sister Isabella, so Cosimo's daughter, and his daughter-in-law, they shared, as it has been recorded, taste for dangerous liaisons. Francesco, who was already a duke, he imprisoned her lover Antinori, and he even later, because he was writing a beautiful poetry and he was so affectionate, and Dianora was so much in love, that Francesco decided to have him killed. And then Dianora's husband, Piero, who was Francesco's son, actually strangled her a few days later. So what a family. Now let's go back to pathology. When we see Francesco I, we can say that with the examination of the skeleton, showed that he was a robust constitution, skeletal age 40 to 50 years old. He was 1.74 meters tall. So you see, Cosimo was 1.78, Francesco was 174. So I assume that was the average height of the men in that time period. And although he was believed or known as the sedentary scholar of alchemic studies, the skeleton shows a very great physical strength. It was shown on his muscular insertions. And like his father, there are the skeletal markers that show that he regularly went horse riding. He suffered from bronchitis, but as we can see here, and quite few of the portraits of Francesco I show that he was obese or that he was getting obese and more obese. And so by his obesity, how plumpy he was getting over the years, you could tell that these portraits were of a later age. In mid-40s, he had biliary colics, likely from gallstones, suffered moderate vertebral and extravertebral arthritis, so nothing as bad as his father with dish. And there was a well-healed fracture of the tailbone. The fracture that he had on the tailbone, that must have been very, very painful. He died of pernicious malaria at the age of 46. And the last in that series of the first Grand Dukes, we are going to talk about Giovanna of Austria, so Francesco's the first wife. So she was the youngest daughter of Emperor Ferdinand I. She was very religious, and when they opened the tomb where she was buried, there was the well-preserved wooden rosary in the coffin. It's interesting how in all the portraits and all the explanations of or descriptions of the portraits, it always says that she was ugly in features. Poor woman. I mean, probably she did her best. Pale with blue eyes, high narrow forehead, prominent lips, the bottom of lip overturned, a long face with prognatism of the lower jaw, prognatio mandibulae. And that was one of the physical characteristics of the Habsburg family. She had 6 difficult deliveries, and her uterus ruptured during the 7th delivery. And that is actually what caused the death of her at the age of 30. And here, these are the photos of the skeleton of Giovanna. So here we see prognatio mandibulae, which was really prominent. She suffered from very bad teeth. Her enamel was all eaten up, maybe because of the several pregnancies. Here we see the scoliosis, but we also see the distorted pelvis. And here we see actually distortion of pelvis. So she must have really suffered as a result of those deliveries. And the last person that I'm going to talk about today, it's Catherine de Medici. So she is in the primogenito line, so Cosimo de Medici line. And she was daughter of the Duke of Urbino. And just very briefly about Caterina, she was the orphan at the French court. So she was the great-granddaughter of Lorenzo il Magnifico. So her father was Lorenzo, Duke of Urbino. Do you remember at the beginning of the talk that I said that it's not known about Pope Leo XI, that whether he was, Duke Alessandro, Duke of Florence, it was not known whether Clement VII was the father or whether it was Duke of Urbino. So yes, but because he died young, his wife died very young, they only had legitimate Caterina. Both of her parents died very, very soon after her birth. Her mother died of, it's said, from puerperal fever at the age of 21, but it is there is a strong indication that actually her husband infected her with syphilis. Although if she suffered from syphilis, I believe there would be some kind of indication that changes in her body. Would she be able, with syphilis, would she be able to give a birth to a healthy daughter? Would that affect the fetus? So this is something that I'm not very sure about. Her father died shortly after of tuberculosis. Yes, they're just masking it, but they just mentioned, oh yes, and syphilis at the age of 27. She had half-brother Alessandro, later Duke of Florence. And she spent her childhood with her paternal grandmother. So with no family, no immediate family, she was looked after her grandmother Alfonsina, who was the wife of Piero the Unfortunate, the one that was really terrible at making decisions that made the whole family go into exile. Pope Clement VII married her off to Henry, Duke of Orleans. He was Duke back then. And his older brother was Dauphin. So he was to inherit the crown, but then he died. So her husband Henry became Henry I. And she was only married at the age of 14. So when she married, they say she came to new country, she came to new culture, she came to new society, she came to new language, everything was new. She was only 14. even though when she came to all that unknown world, she was loved, full of activities, and she was very much the opposite of what her husband was. He was always, with a face that he was never smiling, never happy. One thing that she had to face was that her husband was actually not paying very much attention to her because he already had a mistress, Diane de Poitiers. So she had to battle, she had to outsmart so many obstacles at French court in order to survive. She was orphan, so life was not just cruel enough for her and leaving her the orphan. She came at the age of 14, she was married. She had to, and they say that she was genuinely deeply in love with Henry. And then she had to see him go with Diane, giving her houses, paying attention while she was not there. And that is what created her demeanor and her attitude toward life. So, and another thing, for 10 years, she couldn't conceive. So she was at a point that she went to see Henry and she said, sorry, tough luck, matey, I can't have children. So I would give you a divorce and I will withdraw in convent. You know what I find in those days? The women would go into convent and pray while men would go be adulterers. That's not fair. But anyway, he refused. And she became pregnant. Luckily, she didn't go to that convent. She became pregnant and then speedy, within 13 years, she gave birth to 10 children, just to be on the safe side so that nothing goes wrong. She had 5 sons and 5 daughters. So she was young, 14, and I believe that she confided and hoped that she would build her youth together with her husband, who was, who grew up in court, who had everything he wanted. So she grew jealous. She grew, she felt that resentment toward his indifference, and I don't blame her. And she was accused. I mean, she was always very quiet. She was calm, composed, very calculative. And she knew exactly, you couldn't set her just like that. I mean, she wasn't one of those fiery that she would immediately explode. Oh, no. She took her time and she planned. Everything she did was very, very much planned. She was very elegant, and they say that she graced the French court with Florentine elegance, and many ladies at the court were actually looking at her and making sure that she was noticed. Yes, so she was accused of very horrible crimes. They say that she was the orchestrator of the St. Bartholomew's Night massacre, when there was the massacre over the Huguenots who came for the wedding of their Protestant Henry of Navarre with the Catholic daughter of Catherine, Margot of Valois. Okay, so she was always cold, calm. She was of robust constitution and very healthy, possessed skills for fighting, winning, and dominating. These were the 3 characteristics that, no matter what you read about Catherine, what you watch in the TV series, you will always notice that. She had exceptional will. She was a survivor. She was a survivor in any aspect. Approaching the age of 60, she put a lot of weight. So, and after the death of Henry, she always wore black. There were a few things. Everything that we read about Catherine is that she was really of good health. Even though she fell off a horse, she was all right within a few days. She had cranial trauma, and they said that she had trepanation. Trepanation is opening of the skull, drilling into the skull. No problem for her. She had fever, acute and severe disease. I don't know. She had a little bit of gout. And then She lay seriously in bed after Henry III, her son, had the Duke of Guise, who was a Catholic, cowardly murdered. She got a little bit better. She left the house, fell back, and died on the 5th of January at the age of 70, less 3 months. She was born actually the same year in 1519 and as Cosimo I, her cousin. The death of her, the cause of her death was that they say it was pneumonia. It was actually bronchopneumonia. Thank you very much. So with this, we conclude the second part. And for the third part, we are going all the way into that modern Florence with those very much intertwined marriages from all over the Europe. And you will see there the amount of diseases that they were suffering from. To end this talk, I've got 3 questions for you. The first question, what is this, and is there any connection to our body? This is a question for the medical professionals, health professionals. So what is this? How do you call that? It's mitra. Do you call it papal, the papal headgear, mitra, how do you say? So how is that connected to our body? Anatomy? Because in our heart, left part of the heart, between the chamber, the chamber and the ventricle, there is the valve with 2 cusps, valvula mitralis, seu, valvula bicuspidalis. There it is. And it got its name because it looks like a Pope's head, and that's the one. Atrium, from the left atrium going into left ventriculum. Chocolate for me. Okay, did Catherine de' Medici have any other names she was known for? Whenever we hear about Catherine de' Medici, you know, oh, she was murderous, she was poisoned, she poisoned everybody, she got rid of everybody that stood in her way. She learned to survive, and she applied all those tools. So do you know any other names, such as Black Queen, Serpent Queen? That's another. There is a book written by Mary Hollingsworth. She's the expert on Renaissance Florence, Renaissance Italy. And there is a book called The Serpent Queen. So she was known for being so cold and composed, but man, you didn't want to get on the wrong side of her. And the third question, oh, another chocolate for me. And the third question, what is corridoio vasarino? Sorry, Vasariano. Do you know what it is? Vasari corridor. Yes. Yes, actually it starts from the Uffizi. That's correct. So it starts from Uffizi. This is what Cosimo I did because he lived. So corridoio Vasariano, I don't know, like Vasariano. So this is the corridor. This is the corridor. And it goes, this is the corridor. So it goes from Uffizi, just here, from one side of the, so Palazzo Vecchio, this is where the government seat was. You have Uffizi connected to it. It goes all the way across Ponte Vecchio, across to the other side of Arno River, into Palazzo Pitti, because he didn't want his beloved Eleonora to walk in the evening by herself. She might be attacked, so this was the safe passage. And in, I think, February or March this year, it was open to public. So if you happen to be in Florence, I would warmly recommend that you go and see. And there is like galleries, so there are portraits, there are beautiful paintings there all the way. I think it's about, is it 1.5 kilometers? So it was a really, really big project. So yes. Well, thank you very much. I hope it was interesting. There was a lot of information, but you know, I find them so fascinating, you know, like, oh yeah, I will murder my husband just because I've got a lover. Really? You know, and they got away with it, you know. So nepotism at Pope Leo X. Man, that was shocking. Well, thank you very much.
Catherine de Medici had quite an influence on Mary Queen of Scots, of course, who grew up in that court, having married Francois II.
Yes, Dauphin, yes.
And one might say that some of the reputed behaviour of Mary with her lovers and others consorts may perhaps have derived from Catherine de Medici's influence.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised because she was always composed, always seemed friendly to get the information out of you. But she was very Catholic. She was very devout. That's why she couldn't stand her husband have a lover instead of turning to her. So she was always calculating, and whenever she noticed something around her might pose a threat to her, which Mary, Queen of Scots, did. She was always Catherine knew that her children weren't of best health, and she knew how sick was Francis II. So she wanted to make sure that when he's married, that he's happily married, and that Mary, Queen of Scots, won't take the advantage of him and of France for her benefit for Scotland. And there was always that whether France will back up Scotland or not, and it was going back and forth. But Catherine, oh, she was a survivor. I think we should all learn the skills of surviving, but not to poison, not to assassin, or not to.
Well, we've really run out of time, so.
Sorry about that. But it's the Medici.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you. And please, so here is what I call the Bible for the Medici in terms of their health and their pathology. So it's Dr. Gaetano Pieraccini. You are very welcome to have a look at this. This is from my private collection, and I absolutely, whenever I don't know something, I just go there and I find, yes, it was written here. It was, yeah, it's really amazing, really amazing. Thank you.